everybody, welcome back to the LAB News Studio, back again by popular demand. I'm feeling very cool tone today because it's snowing outside. On the 19th of March, it's snowing, so I am dressing in accordance with the weather conditions. And I want to talk to you today about gender pay gap because this is an issue that's been all over the news recently, and it's raised loads of questions about companies' attitude towards women, whether it's discrimination, whether you should be concerned that you're working for a company that has a large gender pay gap or intending to work for a company that has a large gender pay gap, what will happen to that company if it's found to have a large gender pay gap. So I just wanted to do a short video today to try and dispel some of these rumours and tell you about what it actually is and what it means. Gender pay gap in each company is normally expressed as a percentage, and what that percentage is the difference in pay between men and women across the whole company. So it's an average, but it's not an average in the mathematical sense of the word, because an average normally means that you add up all the salaries and you divide by the number of people that there are, but that is liable to be skewed by extreme highs from people at the top of the company and potentially extreme lows at the people at the bottom. So what the percentage actually is the median, and that's the figure which half of the people earn more than and half of the people earn less than, which is more representative of what actually goes on in the company. So the first important thing to note here that this is not a percentage difference between men and women who are working in the same role. Any difference in pay in that situation is against the law. It's in contravention of the Equality Act 2010 and the Equal Pay Act 1970, and it's not allowed. But gender pay gap is not what this is. This is an average between all men and women across all roles in the whole company. So why is there a gender pay gap? There's a number of different reasons for this, depending on how the company runs and its different employees and how it's structured. So I'm going to use a case study here of EasyJet. So EasyJet has submitted its figures and it's found to have quite a large gender pay gap, 45.5%, which is pretty big. So that's the average difference between what men and women are earning across the whole company. But the reasons for this are pretty good, actually. They've cited that over a quarter of their employees are pilots, and they are paid one of the highest salaries in the whole company at about 92 grand. And by the very nature of the job, a vast majority of their pilots are men. And I had a quick Google of statistics just to see on average how many qualified male pilots there are versus how many qualified female pilots there are. And it's about 100 to 1, very broadly. So automatically that is going to affect the employment pool of any airline. And it's absolutely nothing to do with discrimination. It's just to do with the availability of people who are able to work in that role. This is also added to by the fact they also employ a lot of cabin crew who are paid a lot less, about 24.5 grand. And these roles tend to be filled by women. And again, nothing to do with discrimination, it's just a lot more females tend to go for that role. So automatically you can see how these extremes have occurred, with men earning a really high salary and a lot of women earning a much lower salary. So that is the reason for the gender pay gap in that situation. So what will happen to EasyJet now that they found to have this massive gender pay gap? Absolutely nothing. Nothing will happen to EasyJet. They're not breaching any rules. They have completely legitimate reasons for why their gender pay gap exists. What they have said is they're going to try and increase female uptake in pilots by 20% by 2020. But obviously that's down to the availability of the right people for the job. I'm sure you'd agree that you wouldn't rather have a female pilot driving your plane just because she's a female, even if she's less qualified than a man for the same job. So it completely depends on the availability of the right people for the right job. Okay, so moving on to a more tangible example, which is a law firm. So some law firms have published their stats, and what does it mean if a law firm has a particularly large or particularly small gender pay gap? Well, if it has a large gender pay gap, it could be because all the chief executive top paying roles are taken by men, which could be of a concern to you. But what it could also mean is they have a very flexible and supportive attitude towards women potentially coming back to work part-time after they've had a baby or something like that. So this means that obviously the women would be paid less, but they'd also be working part-time. So that would account for quite a large gender pay gap in that type of situation. So it may not necessarily be a bad thing, and it's not at all indicative of discrimination if that is the case. It might actually be something that's favourable to you. If you are a woman going into the profession, you think maybe one day you might want to have a family and you might want to enter a firm with a more flexible working environment to accommodate you. So I think really what I'm trying to say here is don't get too hung up on this gender pay gap thing, because it could mean anything. If you are really interested, then all companies are required to submit their data by the end of March if they are a public company, and by the 5th of April or the 7th of April if they are a smaller company, smaller private company, or a charity. And this applies to all companies who employ over 250 employees. I will link the government database at the end if you want to have a look at it, but As I said, I really wouldn't be too concerned about gender pay gap. If you are interested and you're going forward to interviews, maybe it'd be a good thing to raise in the interview. Ask the question as to why they have a particularly large gender pay gap or why they have a particularly small gender pay gap. What does that mean for women? What does it mean for men? Feel free to ask those questions, but I really wouldn't be too concerned about any particular company's gender pay gap as being indicative of their attitude towards equality or discrimination or anything like that. As always, these are my own personal views on it. I don't speak for anybody else, any profession, any company, but I'm just telling you what I think about this personally. I hope that's been helpful and it's a bit of a news update for you. As always, please give me ideas for things that I could do to make this video better or things that you might like to see me do in LAB News, and I will try to improve upon it next time. In the meantime, take care guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!